The Pieces Lie Where They Fell by Evil Humor. Edited and co-authored by Anon E. Mouse Jr. Read for you by My Name is R. Chapter 26. Windbreaker, Sweet Surprise, and Gladstone. Part 1. Windbreaker. Windbreaker found himself unable to sit still, his tail flicking back and forth uneasily as he clutched his ledger tightly in his talons. He sighed, trying to calm himself down and take his mind off things, glancing around to see the rest of them wandering around the room. Vix Lee was staring at several of the few intact statues of Luna. Rex was frowning at a faded map of her holy stars. Vittel was hanging over by the door. Knight was flipping through the remaining holy books, and Paige was sitting right next to him. She smiled at him, placing a hoof on his shoulder. "You okay?" she asked, gently. "I'm not sure," Windbreaker said, shifting uncomfortably. "I mean, what that fake priest is doing. It's just..." Windbreaker rolled a talon in the air, trying to find the right words. "I don't even know how to say I feel about this. This is something every hatchery griffin dreams for, and..." He let out a sigh, dropping and shaking his head. "I'm just rambling. You cannot understand what it's like to have your freedom continuously out of your reach for your entire life, and suddenly have it thrown in your face." Paige looked at him, and her eyes softened, a sad smile on her face. "Trust me, Windbreaker, I know exactly how you feel, and I understand what you are going through." Strangely enough, Windbreaker found himself believing her, and he smiled back at her. He then flicked his eyes towards Knight. The Bat Pony was glaring at him, but keeping quiet and keeping his distance. Either Knight trusted him with Paige, or he knew that Paige would be angry with the noble if he did something to get between them. Probably the latter. "So, what are you going to do with your ledger?" Her question caused him to pause, and he looked down at his book, surprised at how tightly he was clutching it to his chest. He tried to imagine himself letting go of the book, for good, and for some reason it churned his stomach and made him clutch it tighter to his chest. It made no sense. The blasted thing said that he wasn't a free griffin, that his life wasn't his own, that he owed the government an unpayable debt, but he could not give it up. She leaned over to hug him, rubbing his side. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you," she said softly, making him aware that he was letting out small whimpers. "You don't need to give it up if it bothers you that much, Windbreaker." "It's okay, you didn't mean it," Windbreaker said, pulling out of the hug, feeling his cheeks heat up. "And besides, I think I will keep it, to remember where I came from, you know?" The lie was obvious, and his throat was burning from it. He took a bottle from his bag and drank from it, making the pain go away. Then he paused and looked at what he had done, and the looks he was getting from every pony. "I'll be going sober tomorrow. I promise. I swear." Knight just rolled his eyes and shook his head, and then turned away in disgust. Well, that was one person Windbreaker couldn't count on for help to kick his drinking habit. "Well, if you don't mind," Paige said as she gently took the bottle with her magic and held it almost horizontally over a potted plant. "May I?" With a tilt of his head, Paige poured out the bottle, slowly. Windbreaker felt his chest tighten at the sight, and he had to turn his head away. "Wait, Wind? I think you should finish this." Paige held the bottle to him, and Windbreaker knew she didn't mean he was to drink it. Windbreaker took the bottle and held it over the plant, and found his talon shaking. He could do this. He could do this. just tip his talon over and he would have... "What are you doing?" A voice caused him to jump, fumbling the bottle and wincing as it bounced on the plant's pot and rolled onto the ground. Turning his head, he saw a unicorn sub-priest storm into the room, grab the bottle and waggling it in his face. "Were you emptying your foul vice into that plant?" Windbreaker stammered, feeling small now. Bad enough that fraud is tainting this temple, but I will not allow others to think they can do the same, mister." The unicorn jabbed a hoof into his chest, causing Windbreaker to pull back from the intimidation. "I am half a mind to report you—" "Hey now, you don't understand the whole situation," Vixley said, placing a hand on the unicorn's shoulder. "You see, Windy here has a bit of a bruise problem, and he was trying to kick the habit." "Really?" The unicorn tilted his head, and before bowing slightly. "My apologies, then, if how touchy Evergreen can be when he runs out of his liquid vice. Then I can only imagine how hard it was for you to do the act." The unicorn placed a hoof on his shoulder. "On behalf of Her Grace Luna, I will pray for your success." "Thank you," Windbreaker said gratefully, a smile growing on his beak. "I will do my best." "So what brings you here?" Knight asked, closing the book and placing it back down. The unicorn looked at Vittle briefly before coughing and saying, "I just wanted to see how Evergreen's guests were doing." "Don't worry, I'm not that kind of thief," Vittle scoffed, rolling her eyes. "I may fake documents and steal stuff here and there, but not from temples and holy sites. That ain't right." "I never said such a thing, ma'am," the unicorn said smoothly. "If any of you need anything, please do not hesitate to ask either Rolling Brook or myself, Clear Prattle." "We thank you," Nightblade said, bowing his head. "May her stars forever shine down on you and your fellow acolyte." "And may she guide you and your fellows in your journey, Lord Blade," the unicorn said, causing Knight to shift around a tiny bit. The unicorn saw that and said, "Your group is wanted and the guards are doing their best to find you. As an acolyte of Her Grace, it is our duty to shelter everyone that comes to our doors." "Ah, thank you," Vittle said cautiously, clearly uncertain of how exactly to deal with this. "But I think we're good for now." "As you say, ma'am. I have a service to attend to, as Evergreen is busy with his other duties." The unicorn bobbed his head and turned to walk away. "If you wish to donate your bottles to fight your demons, Windbreaker, I will be happy to assist you." "Thank you, but..." Windbreaker trailed off, not sure of what his exact reason for protesting was. "I understand. As it is said, one must be ready to face their demons, lest they be overwhelmed by them," Clear Prattle said in a holy tone as he left the room, closing the door behind him. "Well, that happened," Rex said, with a slight resistance in his voice. "Prattle and his fellow seem to be somewhat competent and legitimate." "What do you mean, Rex?" Paige asked the diamond dog. "He seemed rather genuine in his beliefs." "Be as it may, Evergreen could not have gotten this star chart without raising eyebrows. Could not have sold this star chart without raising eyebrows, and he should have realized this map is a fake." Rex gestured to the map, with Knight walking over to it and frowning as he studied it before muttering a curse. "You no doubt see it as well, right, Nightblade?" "Yes, I can see it," Knight said, as he tapped the map before looking at Rex. "Is there anything you don't know?" "Perhaps, but I strongly doubt it," Rex said with a small grin on his face that got every pony laughing for some reason. Windbreaker had started to doze off when Evergreen came into the room, startling every pony awake. "Come, now," he barked. He looked very agitated, his robe more ruffled than before. I had to do a lot of preparation for you, and I'm not going to let it cut in on my personal time, or have to explain to those idiots why I am late for this night's service. You mean you can do it for me? Windbreaker asked, as he got to his talons and paws. Of course I can do it, you colt, he grumbled, already trotting back to the staircase. As I said, it took a lot of preparations, and I can't be drunk, as I could easily mess this up if I wasn't thinking clearly, and get the guards breaking down my door. Okay, Windbreaker said, unsure how to take all this. He was really doubting that Vittel was right to trust this guy. Do you want to be a hatchery griffin for the rest of your life? Evergreen barked. Now come on. As he angrily stalked to the stairs, Windbreaker gave one final look around the room, and with the others behind him, he followed Evergreen down to his office to see that he was not kidding about needing to do some serious preparations. The desk was gone, and the entire floor was covered in chalk markings that looked like serious arcane stuff, with a circle in the middle. Good. Now you stand in the center, and you lot stand out of the way. Windbreaker tilted his head to look at Rex, who nodded, before moving to the center of the room, where a large circle had been drawn. Okay, now what? You, Unicorn Mare, Evergreen snapped from the far side of the room. Take his bag. That crazy artifact he and the rest of you lot have somehow gotten your hooves on could seriously interfere with this procedure, if it's within the array. So take it and stand against the wall. Now! With a tiny huff of annoyance from Paige, Windbreaker found his saddlebag lifted off his back, and he suddenly felt very bare. Eyes on me, you colt, Evergreen barked again, dragging his attention back to the unicorn. Now don't move, or I will turn your legs to stone to keep you still. Windbreaker watched his horn start to glow a dark red before it began to settle over him. He began to get a bit worried as Evergreen tilted his head from side to side, grunting a bit louder each time, and the outer parts of the arcane circle started to glow and let out an odd-sounding hum. Windbreaker felt sweat beginning to roll down his body, his wings twitching to open and his tail flicking between his hind legs. He found himself staring at a bead of sweat that was sliding down his beak, causing him to itch something terrible. As each second passed, the urge to wipe it away grew worse and worse, until he found his will to stay still harder and harder to maintain, and he was wondering if Evergreen was just Okay, we're done, Evergreen said, causing Windbreaker to jerk his head upwards. He was about to ask if he could move when Evergreen slammed the back door open and began to try to drag his desk back in, before getting it stuck halfway and giving up. With a grunt, the fraudulent priest grabbed a bottle from the desk and started to chug it down completely. Finishing the bottle and tossing it into a corner where it crashed into several pieces, he said to them, "You can leave now." "It's done? I'm free?" Windbreaker asked. "Just like that?" "Yes, just like that," Evergreen snapped. Figuring out and setting up the exact array to disable all those alarm spells was the hardest part. Casting wasn't that difficult. And now I'd appreciate it if you'd all get out of here, as I have a mass to lead. They're all scared because of you idiots blowing up the power station. Giving them a dirty look, he snagged another bottle from his tilted desk and began to chug it down. Windbreaker considered saying something, but felt a hoof on his shoulder, and saw it was Paige's. "Come on, let's go," she said softly. Windbreaker nodded and stepped out of the array. As his saddlebags settled onto his back again, he gave Paige a nod of thanks, and then headed for the door. He could feel Nightblade's glare burning into his back, but he didn't care. He was free. Minutes later, as the 6 of them stood by the temple's door, Vixley looked around in the darkening sky. "So, which way do we go?" she asked. "Besides, out of this city." "Down." Vidal tilted her head as she began to walk down the street. "There have to be a few gatehouses that we can slip by." "I don't think we should go that way," Paige said softly, but with enough presence to cause every pony to pause. She tilted her head towards a couple ponies with cloaks on them, standing near the far end of the temple block. "I can't say exactly why, but I have the feeling that they're with the guards." Vidal frowned and began to take a step backwards. "I think you're right," she said, as the 2 ponies began to walk over to them. "Come on, let's go, guys." She began to push them back up the street. "And where, pray tell, are you going?" A voice from behind them called out, causing them to halt in place. Turning around, they saw one of the 2 ponies' body change and become a white mare in very fancy armor. "Oh dear," Knight said, backing up in a fright. "The full moon." "Yes, and you are all coming with me right now," she said, walking closer to them with her horn glowing. "You know, there's a saying in my homeland that would be rather appropriate right now," Vixley said nervously as she looked at Rex, who had a hoof in his vest. "What's that?" "Cheese it!" Scooping up Rex, she started running, the others hot on her heels. Windbreaker had enough time to realize what Rex was doing with that bottle in his hoof, and grabbed the scarf before a massive amount of smoke began to blossom out, with the guards behind them coughing loudly. Part 2. Sweet Surprise. Sweet Surprise was cursing herself for dismissing the Diamond Dog as a low threat, even after the report on the alchemist. Using her magic to cause a miniature whirlwind to blow the smoke into small enough parts to dissipate the effects of the smoke bomb, she saw that the 6 wanted criminals had already bolted up the street. "In pursuit of 6 bolters, going up Lower Temple Drive," she said into her helmet's shortwave communication spell that was connected to her guards' helmets, as she began to use her magic to increase her endurance to mimic Earth Pony biology, so she could close the head start they got on her. "Box them in on White Shine Avenue." Sweet Surprise ignored the yes ma'ams she got from her guards, calling out the streets they were taking, and smiled to herself as they were close to a dead end known as the shipyard. Even if they stole a ship, there was no way they could get away with it, as her guards would be able to surround them and force them down. Still, Gentle Step had said to use caution in dealing with them, and she'd be the idiot ponies thought she was if she were to ignore the advice of the young Captain General. Sweet Surprise had reached out with her magic to delay the 6 when she felt something odd. She could sense several items on 4 of them that were drenched in magic. She had never encountered anything like them before, and she had helped Violet with some pretty unusual artifacts in the past. The Elder Unicorn was far more experienced, as it was her special talent, but Sweet Surprise had seen some odd ones in her time too, and whatever these were dwarfed anything she had seen in her life. And if she was right, they were mostly dormant, with only a trickle of their true power active. She had been concerned in how heavily hoofed Gentle was being in regards to these foals. She was very cautious in believing they were all part of some secret cabal with the goal to overthrow the government. But this had brought more weight to the claims that they were dangerous traitors. Whatever the truth about their actual allegiances was, Sweet had a duty to apprehend them for the death of several of Violet's guards at the very least, and she would do that right now as her guards managed to herd them into the shipyard, with the Minotaur using her hammer to knock the cobblestone and iron sign saying, lower Canterlot shipyard down to block her path. She pulled it apart and tossed the pieces to the side with several squads of her guards behind her. But it cost her precious seconds, as they were aboard a ship, with the Minotaur in the pilot's seat of a skimmer. With a flick of her hoof to break up and get into the other skimmers, with Sweet Surprise jumping into one herself, she saw several guards take to the air to overshadow the Minotaur driving downwards? Sweet Surprise blinked in surprise. The Minotaur was speeding down the takeoff platform. She then cursed herself for being distracted and chased after her, with 3 skimmers following her, the ones in the air no longer available due to the time it would take them to rejoin the chase. Bracing herself as she guided the miniature airship off the platform, Sweet Surprise saw the tail end of the Minotaur's ship turn around the corner as she hit the ground. Pushing on the acceleration lever to make up ground, she muttered curses in her head for missing the fact that the daughter of a shipyard master in the world's capital country of airship production would be proficient in their usage. "Ma'am, we see them heading towards Bering Street," Eagle Sight said, one of her ponies in the skimmers that were in the sky. "Quicksilver and I are making quick descents to box them in." "Affirmative," she said, pushing the airship even faster as they skimmed over the street, with ponies screaming and jumping out of the way. A smile started to break out on her face, despite the fact she had yet to capture them, but they were directly in front of her and the distance was closing fast. The Minotaur tried to shake her off and by trying to turn down another street, when Sweet Surprise snapped a shield up to block that area off, causing minor collateral damage and forcing it back into Bering Street, and a dead end as there was no way forwards past the low fence and the 2-story quaint house that looked very familiar. The Minotaur then reminded Sweet Surprise that these things they were driving were airships, as she rotated the propulsion jet several degrees upwards, which let her hit the fence and then ride the roof as a ramp. Sweet Surprise had no time to replicate the act, spinning to the side and snapping up a shield to stop herself from crashing into Eagle Sight's skimmer, although her skimmer hit the shield hard, killing the engine completely and destroying the body of the skimmer. She had her head pointed in the right direction to see the first skimmer behind her try and copy what the Minotaur had done, only to miss the subtle adjustment the Minotaur did, and hit the fence only to slam into the roof of the house, with the other skimmer spinning out of control and destroying the fence, hitting the well-kept lawn and digging up a fair deal as it spun in a circle before Steadyline managed to cut the engine. Eagle Sight opened his mouth to say something, but Sweet Surprise was not going to let the 6 get away this easily. "After them, now!" she barked, using her magic to take control of the skimmer, forcing it down the street, with Eagle Sight wisely moving out of the way and letting her take the pilot seat as she forced the ship to its limit, as she matched each twist and turn that the Minotaur made, an angry scowl on her face as they continued to stay just out of reach, while the Diamond Dog was mocking her by sticking his head off the side and having a wide smile on his face, sticking his tongue out at her. Still, it would end shortly, as they were close to the wall, and she had guards on it that would be able to halt their skimmer. With another sharp turn that threatened to capsize Sweet Surprise's skimmer, she saw the wall directly in front of her, with the gatehouse of the south looming in front of them. "Every guard!" she shouted, booming her voice across the lower with her magic. "Stop these! Ah!" she swore as the Minotaur nearly came to a complete stop, turned the jet propulsion with such finery that it managed to send her skimmer directly upwards, before cutting the engine and "Sweet Surprise, the wall!" Eagle Sight shouted, causing Sweet Surprise to look up in time to see the wall approaching incredibly fast. "Bail!" She threw herself out of the skimmer, rolling across the ground, only for it to disappear on her and suddenly be plunged into something liquidy. On instinct, Sweet Surprise turned herself into a sea pony to allow herself to be able to breathe the water in safely, only to spit out the foul-tasting water, floundering as she tried to get herself properly oriented. All of a sudden, a pair of hooves reached out under her forelegs and dragged her upright. Shaking her head, she saw a pony wearing a rebreather mask, a thick bodysuit, and that had the sewage maintenance symbol on his chest. Oh no! With a snarl on her face, she regrew her lower body and a pair of wings as she exploded out of the sewers, and hovered briefly over the wall before spotting the speeding skimmer in the distance. She was in no mood to care about catching them in perfect condition anymore, and began to throw bolts of magic at them to knock them out of the airship. They managed to avoid the first few bolts before she finally caused them to overturn and the skimmer crashed into the tree line. Okay, no one makes a fool out of me and gets away with... She paused as she landed in front of the totaled skimmer and quickly saw there was no one in or around it, which meant they had bolted on her. A snarl was building in her throat when she felt some pony teleport right behind her. "There you are, Sweet Surprise," Gentle Step said in her infuriatingly stoic voice. "I hope you can explain a number of things, such as the reason why there is a skimmer lodged in the roof of my house." "Those traitors led me and my guards on a chase through the lower and totally humiliated us," Sweet Surprise snarled, pawing the ground. "So that is the reason why there is a skimmer lodged in my roof and my lawn is completely dug up?" "Oh, shove it with your house and your lawn!" Sweet Surprise jabbed a hoof into the Captain General's chest plate. "They are getting further away each second, and you're not worried about this." Sweet Surprise noticed how calm Gentle was being by her standards. "Which means you already have something planned." "Correct," the younger mare said. "I already have several agents herding them into an ambush and keeping an eye on them, both to see where they are heading and to see where the rest of their treasonous organization is." "I see." Sweet Surprise felt her heart begin to slow down, understanding her superior's reason for her to stay put. "Anything else?" "Yes, go clean yourself, as you smell worse than demon poop," Gentle Step said in her normal, emotionless voice, with her broken nose wrinkling, her way of fanning away the stench. "Ah," Sweet Surprise said, licking her lips and instantly regretting it. "I'll pop into the lower guardhouse and shower off there." "Absolutely not," Gentle Step said, taking a step backwards. "I will not have you foul up the guardhouse. Go home and clean yourself there." "But I can't," Sweet Surprise began to sputter, her heart starting to race. I have to use the guardhouse." "No, you do not," Gentle Step said calmly, taking another step backwards. "Now I am ordering you to go to your home, clean yourself and your gear there, send me a report on today's events, and then come in tomorrow ready to perform your duties." Gentle Step gave her no chance to try and counter this by teleporting away, leaving Sweet Surprise alone. With a whine and light pawing the ground, the unicorn muttered to herself, "Hot Rod and Sound Mind are going to kill me when they find out I tracked sewage into the house." Then she looked around. "Maybe some pony around here has a hose I can borrow." She tapped her chin in thought before wincing, shaking her hoof and teleporting back into Canterlot. Part 3. Gladstone. They were standing in the dark forest, the 6 of them, when their leader got the message from Canterlot. "It seems," he said, as he read the letter to himself before breaking out into a grin, "that we have our orders to capture several individuals. The guards are directing them towards us as we speak. He hoofed out pictures of the 6 they needed to capture. "How are we to do this?" one of the dark-skinned figures asked with a chuckle, already aware of what the answer would be. "Same as always," the leader said confidently as he took his pony form. "Once they reach Sunny Town, we'll capture them." "Got it, Gladstone," one of them said, causing the rest of them to laugh, each one of the dark figures taking on their pony forms. So, first of all, for this chapter, I'm going to mention the bit with the potted plant and the guy who ran into the room. I'm having to wonder what he thought was going on when they were pouring alcohol onto a plant. Did he think they were trying to tempt the plant to join them? Bring the plant over to the side of alcoholics? "Ooh, we're gonna tempt your potted plants to join us in our sin." Dude, no one does that. Okay, if somebody does that, they need mental help. They're clearly insane. I don't know what he thought was happening. Alright. Next thing I wanted to mention was, I noticed when she said that the area looked very familiar, and then they saw the house. Or, there it was, a 2-story quaint house that looked very familiar. That's when I guessed it was going to be Gentle Step's house. And every time they crashed into it, or did something to it, I got more and more certain. And then finally, when the guy tried to talk to her about it, that's when I just knew, yep, that's going to be Gentle Step's house. That one of her subordinates just trashed. She was far more merciful to her subordinate than the... what was it, a drug ring? Something? Some criminal group that accidentally broke one of the porch steps earlier. She didn't seem pleased, though. Alright. I also noticed that this is the wife of Sound Mind, the psychiatrist we met 2 chapters ago. Small world sometimes, isn't it? Despite this being a very large city, like, I'm imagining several thousand people live here. Well, such coincidences do happen. It's not the biggest one so far. This one could happen in real life. Yeah. Alrighty. Now finally, for Gladstone. He's actually not a character original to this fic. I don't know if you know of him. Maybe some of you do. Probably some of you do not. I will put a link to his original source down below. There might be spoilers for his nature, if that's supposed to be a secret here, so I'm not going to explain him here in his entirety. I will say that in his source material, and this is 1,000 years later, so he might be a little different, he is from originally a My Little Pony fan content. He is from My Little Pony originally, but not canon, not official, not this. He's from another thing. He is immortal, which is how he's alive 1,000 years later. Not to say he can't be killed. I don't know if he can be killed, but most immortals can still be killed in some way or another. He never fought the elements themselves, and he probably wouldn't have been much of a 2-part threat worthy. He's not as powerful as Discord or Chrysalis or Nightmare Moon, but he wasn't a pushover either. He's a serious threat. He's probably about right for these guys. They might or might not be able to take him in a straight fight. Him and his people. Yeah. Hopefully they'll manage to avoid getting in a straight fight. They certainly should avoid getting in a fight where the other people have the advantage, because Gladstone's people were not pushovers in combat. Don't Don't get in a fight with them. They're scary. Yeah. Seriously, they're scary. They're not good. They are bad news. They're not changelings. They are a different sort of shapeshifter. Changelings is what I thought at first. But nope. I recognize the name of Gladstone and Sunnytown. Sunnytown's probably even more what gave it away. Sunnytown. I remember Sunnytown. Sunnytown is a terrifying place. Don't go there. It's a terrible vacation spot in the Everfree Forest. Hey, the Everfree Forest. They're headed to the Everfree Forest, everybody. I figured that out. Okie dokie. Well, I think that's all for now. This has been an extra long commentary because I had a lot to say about the people I'm not saying anything about. Yes. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you had a good time. See you again later. Goodbye, everybody.